I saw Ryan laughing with Victor Hale before I even entered the restaurant, and that was the first moment fear entered my chest. The restaurant stood above the cities on the top floor of a glass building. Soft piano music floated through the room while wealthy guests drank expensive wine beneath golden lights. The entire place looked elegant and untouchable, and the moment I stepped inside, I felt painfully ordinary. My black dress suddenly seemed too simple for the room, and my nervous smile felt unnatural on my face. Ryan looked happier than I had seen him in years. Stress had slowly exhausted him over the past few months, but that evening hope finally returned to his expression. He worked late almost every night at Hale Textile Group, trying to prove himself to managers who barely noticed his existence. Yet everything seemed different now because Victor Hale finally noticed him. Unfortunately, I immediately wished he had not. Victor stood near the window with one hand inside his pocket while speaking calmly to Ryan. He looked elegant in a dark gray suit, but there was something deeply cold behind his polished smile. Some people carried power naturally, while others carried danger without effort. Victor somehow carried both at the same time, and the combination unsettled me immediately. The moment Ryan introduced me, Victor's eyes rested on me slightly longer than necessary. The look was subtle enough that Ryan never noticed it, but it still left me uncomfortable. Victor welcomed me politely, and even pulled out my chair himself. Everything about his behavior appeared respectful on the surface, which somehow made the situation feel worse. Men like Victor never needed to raise their voices, because their confidence already controlled every room they entered. Dinner started normally enough. Expensive food arrived on carefully arranged white plates, while Victor discussed company plans with Ryan. My husband answered every question carefully, trying to sound intelligent and professional. While listening to him speak, I realized how desperately he wanted this promotion. Ryan had spent most of his life feeling invisible. His father constantly criticized him, while previous employers treated him like another replaceable worker. Hearing admiration from someone powerful affected him deeply, and I could already see how badly he wanted Victor's approval. As an English teacher, I often noticed how confidence changed people's language. Nervous students usually relied on short and uncertain sentences, but confidence made their vocabulary stronger and more natural. That night, Ryan spoke English more fluently than I had ever heard before. Somebody important finally made him feel valuable. During dessert, Victor suddenly turned his attention toward me and asked about my work at the language center. I explained that I taught intermediate English to adults preparing for international jobs and professional exams. Victor listened carefully while slowly drinking his coffee, and then he asked which part of teaching I enjoyed most. I told him language could completely transform someone's future. Many students arrived carrying fear inside them because they felt embarrassed making mistakes. However, confidence slowly changed them over time. Watching shy people become expressive and independent reminded me that growth often begins quietly. Victor smiled after hearing that explanation, but his expression shifted slightly before he spoke again. According to him, people only revealed their true personalities after receiving power. I still remember the exact way he looked toward Ryan while saying those words, because Ryan seemed almost proud hearing them. The conversation continued, but my appetite disappeared completely after that moment. Later that evening, Ryan stepped away briefly to answer a work call, and silence immediately settled between Victor and me. I reached for my water glass, pretending not to notice him, studying my face again. Then he unexpectedly asked whether I liked exif things. The question caught me off guard. So I laughed softly and admitted that I preferred peaceful things instead. Victor smiled slowly, almost as if my answer entertained him. According to him, peace usually belonged to wealthy people because comfort protected them from fear. I did not know how to respond to that strange comment. When Ryan returned, Victor immediately became warm and friendly again. He placed a hand on Ryan's shoulder and officially announced the promotion. My husband looked genuinely shocked after hearing the news. His salary would nearly double. and Victor even offered to help us move into a better apartment closer to the company offices. Ryan could barely stop, smiling on the drive home. He talked excitedly about new furniture, better schools for our future children, and finally escaping years of financial pressure. Every few minutes he mentioned Victor again, repeating how intelligent and generous he seemed. I listened quietly while city lights moved across the car windows beside us. Part of me wanted to believe our lives were finally improving. Another part of me could still feel Victor's eyes resting on me across that dinner table. And deep inside, I already sensed that the promotion came with a price Ryan was too hopeful to notice. Before I share this rep story, I need to know, where are you listening from? I would love to hear from you. The promotion changed our lives faster than I expected, but not in the way I imagined. Within 2 weeks, Ryan moved into a private office at Hale Textile Group and started spending more time at work than at home. New responsibilities followed him everywhere. His phone rang during breakfast, during dinner, and often after midnight. At first, he apologized whenever work interrupted our conversations, but eventually, he stopped noticing the interruptions altogether. Victor Hale remained close to him through everything. Sometimes Ryan returned home excited after private meetings with Victor, while other nights he looked emotionally exhausted. Before the promotion, Ryan feared failure. After the promotion, he feared losing success, and that fear slowly began reshaping his personality in quiet ways. I noticed the changes long before Ryan did. He became more distracted during conversations and less interested in ordinary moments between us. Some evenings, he barely touched his dinner because he remained busy answering work emails. Other nights, he repeated Victor's opinions during conversations about money, ambition, and success as though those ideas suddenly mattered more than his own. The distance between us did not appear all at once. It grew slowly enough to feel almost invisible. One evening, I stayed late at the language center, helping students prepare for speaking exams. We practiced discussions about workplace pressure and personal goals. Many learners struggled to express emotions naturally in English, so I encouraged them to describe real experiences instead of memorized answers. Honest emotions usually create stronger language because people communicate more naturally when they speak from personal experience. That night, while listening to my students discuss stress and ambition, I realized I understood workplace pressure better than anyone else in the room. When I arrived home, Ryan stood silently near the kitchen counter with his tie hanging loose around his neck. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes, but excitement still appeared in his voice when he explained that Victor invited us to another private dinner at his house outside the city. I immediately felt uncomfortable again. Ryan noticed my reaction and tried reassuring me. He explained that important business clients would attend, and refusing the invitation could appear disrespectful. When I asked whether other employees were bringing their wives, Ryan hesitated briefly before admitting that we were the only couple invited. A heavy silence settled between us after that answer. Ryan quickly looked away and started discussing something else, pretending not to notice my discomfort. For the first time in our marriage, I felt emotionally alone beside him, and Ryan seemed too consumed by ambition to understand why. Saturday arrived too quickly. Victor's house stood behind large iron gates surrounded by tall trees. The property looked more like a luxury hotel than a home. Warm lights glowed through enormous windows while expensive cars filled the driveway outside. The moment we entered, a woman collected our coats and offered drinks. Soft jazz music drifted through hidden speakers, while wealthy guests laughed around crystal glasses and polished marble floors. Everything looked elegant, but none of it felt warm or welcoming to me. Victor greeted us personally near the staircase. He shook Ryan's hand firmly before turning toward me with that same calm smile. This time, however, his attention felt more deliberate, almost as if he already understood how uncomfortable he made me. During dinner, Ryan sat beside Victor discussing company expansion plans while I listened quietly. Most conversations focused on money, investments, and international partnerships. I followed the discussion carefully. even though many business expressions sounded advanced. Still, listening to those conversations reminded me how professional English changes depending on environment and status. Formal business settings often include vocabulary such as negotiation, competition, market strategy, and corporate growth. Exposure to real conversations can improve comprehension naturally, because vocabulary becomes connected to emotions and situations instead of isolated memorization. At one point, Victor asked about my students again. This time, his interest felt unusually personal. I explained that many students studied English because they wanted better careers abroad, while others simply wanted confidence during interviews or travel. Learning another language often gave people a second version of themselves. Quiet people became expressive, and fearful people slowly became independent. Victor listened silently while turning his glass slowly between his fingers. Then he said something that stayed inside my mind long after dinner ended. According to him, people only discovered their true limits after life offered them temptation. The sentence itself sounded harmless, but the way he looked directly at me while saying it made my stomach tighten immediately. Later that evening, several guests moved aside toward the garden terrace. Ryan followed two investors to continue discussing business opportunities, leaving me alone inside for several minutes. I walked toward the hallway searching for the restroom when Victor suddenly appeared beside me. His voice remained calm and controlled as he asked whether I enjoyed the evening. I answered politely and tried continuing down the hallway, but he stepped slightly closer, carefully controlling the space around me without actually touching me. Then he started speaking about Ryan again. According to Victor, my husband had enormous potential inside the company and could eventually become one of the youngest department directors in Hale Textile Group history. I answered honestly and said Ryan deserved success because he worked incredibly hard for years. Victor smiled slowly after hearing that. Then he asked whether I would continue supporting Ryan regardless of what success eventually demanded from both of us. The question immediately unsettled me. I replied carefully that healthy success should never destroy people emotionally. For the first time that evening, Victor laughed quietly. According to him, idealistic people rarely survived inside powerful industries because ambition eventually changed everyone. My heartbeat became faster after hearing those words. I told him I should return outside before Ryan noticed I was gone. However, just before I walked away, Victor gently touched my wrist. The movement lasted only seconds, but my entire body froze instantly. His voice remained soft while he spoke. He reminded me that Ryan trusted him completely now. Then he released my hand and calmly walked away. I stepped outside immediately, trying to breathe normally again. Cold night air helped slightly, but my hands still felt weak. Across the garden, I saw Ryan smiling beside wealthy businessmen while discussing future projects confidently. He looked happier than I had seen him in years. And for the first time, I realized Victor did not simply want admiration from employees. He wanted influence over every part of their lives. On the drive home, Ryan talked excitedly about possible international travel opportunities through the company. He repeated Victor's compliments several times and admitted that nobody had ever believed in his potential this strongly before. I stared quietly through the car window while streetlights moved across my reflection. Then Ryan finally noticed my silence and asked whether something happened during the dinner. For several seconds, I considered telling him everything about Victor's behavior, the strange comments, and the uncomfortable tension surrounding every interaction. But Ryan looked so hopeful while speaking about his future that fear stopped me. I remembered our years of financial struggle, the unpaid bills, the leaking apartment ceiling, and the nights Ryan skipped meals pretending he was not hungry. So instead of telling the truth, I forced a tired smile and quietly told him I was only exhausted. Ryan accepted the answer immediately, and somehow that hurt me even more. The following week became the longest week of my life. Victor started calling Ryan constantly, even during weekends. At first, the conversations sounded professional, but over time they became strangely personal. Ryan began repeating Victor's opinions during ordinary discussions at home, as though those ideas carried more importance than his own. Sometimes he defended Victor before I even criticized him, and little by little, our conversations stopped feeling natural. I watched the change happen slowly enough that Ryan barely noticed it himself. One rainy evening, Ryan came home carrying several company documents under his arm. He looked exhausted, but there was excitement hidden beneath the exhaustion while he explained that Victor wanted him to travel abroad for a 3-month business project. According to Ryan, the opportunity could eventually lead to a permanent executive position inside the company. That admitted something that immediately unsettled me. Victor personally recommended him for the role. The apartment suddenly felt smaller around me after hearing those words. I tried imagining 3 months alone while Victor remained involved in every part of our lives, and the thought left me deeply uncomfortable. That night, sleep never came. Instead, I sat near the window grading essays from my students whilst rain moved softly against the glass. One student had written about personal boundaries in professional environments. Her grammar was imperfect, but her message felt powerful because she explained that confidence sometimes meant protecting yourself even when silence seemed easier. Reading her words affected me more than I expected because language often reveals truths people avoid speaking aloud. The next morning, I finally called Mira. Mira worked with me at the language center and understood people quickly. After listening carefully to everything, she remained silent for several seconds before asking whether Ryan knew about Victor touching my wrist. I looked down immediately and admitted that he did not. Mira sounded frustrated but calm while explaining how manipulative people slowly create emotional dependence. First, they offer support, then opportunities, then pressure. By the time others recognize the danger, the control already feels normal. Her words stayed inside my mind the entire day. That evening, Ryan invited me to another company gathering at a hotel downtown. I wanted to refuse immediately, but something inside me understood that avoiding Victor forever was impossible now. The event looked elegant from the outside, but tension followed me the moment we entered. Wealthy investors filled the ballroom, while employees moved carefully through conversations like actors following invisible rules. Everyone smiled too easily. Everyone sounded careful with their words. Victor approached us almost immediately. He greeted Ryan warmly before turning toward me with the same controlled smile I had started fearing. Throughout dinner, Ryan remained occupied discussing contracts with foreign partners, while Victor stayed surprisingly close to me the entire evening. Every conversation carried hidden pressure beneath polite language. At one point, Victor asked whether I enjoyed the lifestyle Ryan's promotion created for us. I answered carefully and admitted that peace mattered more to me than luxury. Victor smiled after hearing that answer. Then he leaned slightly closer and explained that peace usually disappeared once people became afraid of losing comfort. His words unsettled me immediately because they sounded less like conversation and more like warning. A few minutes later, Ryan stepped away to answer another business call. The moment he disappeared into the hallway, Victor's expression changed completely. His voice became softer and more direct. He explained that Ryan's future depended heavily on trust inside the company. According to him, successful people needed loyal relationships surrounding them because ambition required sacrifice from everyone involved. I finally understood exactly what he wanted. For the first time in months, anger became stronger than fear inside me. I looked directly at Victor and quietly told him to stop involving himself in our marriage. For several seconds, he simply stared at me without emotion. Then he calmly claimed that I misunderstood his intentions. Before leaving the table, however, he added one final sentence. According to Victor, powerful people rarely reacted well to rejection. My hands shook after he walked away. When Ryan returned, he immediately noticed something was wrong. This time, I could not force another lie between us. On the drive home, I finally told him everything, not only about that evening, everything. The wrist touching, the private comments, the emotional pressure. and the way Victor slowly used success to create control around us. Ryan listened silently while driving through empty streets. I expected immediate anger, but what appeared first in his face was heartbreak. He finally understood why I feared those dinners from the beginning. When we reached home, Ryan sat quietly for a long time before speaking again. Then he admitted something painful. Part of him already noticed Victor's strange behavior months earlier, but he ignored it because he desperately wanted the promotion to succeed. Financial pressure blinded him slowly, and ambition made him trust the wrong person. Hearing that confession hurt both of us because neither of us recognized how far the distance between us had already grown. Next morning, Ryan resigned from Hale Textile Group. Not through email, not through a letter. He walked directly into Victor Hale's office and ended everything face to face. For days, we expected threats, humiliation, or revenge. Ryan barely slept during that period, and sometimes I caught him staring silently at his phone, waiting for something terrible to happen. But surprisingly, nothing happened. Victor simply removed Ryan from the company and never contacted us again. 2 months later, Ryan found work at a smaller manufacturing firm outside the city. The salary was lower, but peace slowly returned to our lives. Even then, the damage did not disappear immediately. Ryan's spoke less than before for a while, and sometimes he apologized to me without actually saying the words aloud. I continued teaching at the language center and eventually started leading advanced speaking classes for professionals. Many students asked whether confidence mattered more than grammar while learning English. I always gave them the same answer. Words become powerful only when people learn how to protect their voice. And after everything that happened, I finally understood that lesson myself. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more emotional English stories. And remember, sometimes protecting your peace is more important than chasing success.